Colonel Potter, sir, my last wish is to be buried in my mother's wedding gown.
I've seen these Dodgers for 40 years, all the tricks. Dismissed!
Mass wasn't just a TV show. It was a landmark. For 11 seasons, it captured the hearts of millions, blending gut-busting laughter with moments that could absolutely break your heart. It didn't just entertain, it held a mirror up to the absurdities of war, becoming a voice for a generation, grappling with a real-life conflict. Viewers didn't just watch the 4077th. They felt like they were right there in the swamp, sharing the jokes, the stress, and the incredible bonds forged under fire. The chemistry of that cast was pure lightning in a bottle, but behind all that on-screen friendship, a different story was playing out. One by one, beloved stars started vanishing from the lineup. And these weren't just minor characters. We're talking about pillars of the show, fan favorites whose sudden exits left audiences totally stunned and asking one simple question. Why? Why would anyone leave a show that was loved by millions? This wasn't just about contracts or wanting more money. We're pulling back the curtain on the personal struggles, the bruised egos, and the creative dead ends that pushed stars like McLean, Stevenson, and Wayne Rogers to walk away from the biggest show on TV, right at the height of its power. This is the real story behind the exits that shocked fans and changed television forever. To understand the shockwaves that hit Maya Sorch, you have to start with the first and maybe the biggest departure, McLean Stevenson, the man who brought D. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake to life. Henry wasn't your typical commander. He was a bit of a bumbler, soft-hearted, and usually in way over his head. Less of a military man, and more of a reluctant, overwhelmed father figure. His office was a chaotic safe space where Hawkeye and Trapper could always find a sympathetic, if comically useless, ear. And his bond with Radar, who always seemed to know what he needed before he did, was one of the show's most beloved dynamics. Fans didn't just like Henry Blake, they adored him. But behind the scenes, McLean Stevenson was getting antsy. While there was reportedly no bad blood between him and his castmates, he was deeply frustrated. He had originally auditioned to play Hawkeye, and even though he was brilliant as Henry Blake, it seems a little resentment had started to grow. As the show's popularity exploded, the spotlight focused more and more on Alan Alda's Hawkeye Pierce. Mabai CCH was becoming Hawkeye's show, and Stevenson, a gifted comedian, felt like he was being pushed to the sidelines. He believed his character, the commanding officer, should have been a bigger deal. He didn't just want to be a star, he wanted to be the star. In a later interview, Stevenson was honest about his ambition, saying, "I know I will not be in anything as good as this show, but I have to leave and be number one." His ambition was supercharged by a big money offer from NBC, which promised him his very own show, a chance to finally be the headliner. He also felt disrespected by the production company, which reportedly refused to give him a raise, telling him he just wasn't as essential as stars like Alda. So, at the end of Season 3, he made his choice. He wasn't coming back. The shows. Creators Larry Gelbart and Gene Reynolds now had a problem. They could have given Henry a simple, happy send-off with an honorable discharge. But Masha H was never about taking the easy way out. It was a comedy set in a war zone, and they decided to use Henry's exit to make a powerful, unforgettable statement. In war, not everyone gets to go home. The Season 3 finale, Abyssinia Henry, was mostly an upbeat farewell. The camp throws a party, there are tearful goodbyes, and Henry, wearing a hilariously loud suit, boards a helicopter home. The cast filmed the whole episode thinking that was the end. But Gelbart and Reynolds had kept the real ending a secret from almost everyone. Just before filming the final scene, they handed the actors a single new page. On it was the moment where a stunned Radar O'Reilly walks into the operating room, his voice cracking, and delivers the news. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake's plane was shot down over the Sea of Japan. It spun in. There were no survivors. Abudi. Shock and grief on the actors' faces were completely real. It was a television moment nobody had ever seen before. Back in 1975, you just didn't kill off a beloved main character on a hit sitcom. The public outcry was massive. CBS and 20th Century Fox were slammed with thousands of angry letters from viewers who felt betrayed. But Gelbart and Reynolds stood their ground, personally answering letters and explaining that the brutal ending was the entire point. War doesn't have a clean, happy ending for everyone. Good people die for no reason. For McLean Stevenson, the Bull, Aftermath was a tough lesson. His first solo show was a flop, followed by a string of other sitcoms that just didn't work. He became a familiar face on game shows and as a guest host, but he never got back to the level of fame he had on Mock Ashu H. Years later, he spoke about his decision with painful honesty. In a now famous cautionary quote, he said, "I made the mistake of believing that people were enamored of McLean Stevenson, when they were enamored of Henry Blake." He had misjudged everything, not realizing the love people felt was for the character, a character who only truly worked inside the incredible world of the 4077th. If Hawkeye was the sarcastic, beating heart of South H's early years, then Captain Trapper John McIntyre, played by Wayne Rogers, was his partner in crime. In the original movie and the show's first few seasons, they were a package deal. Hawkeye and Trapper were the central duo, two brilliant surgeons whose cynicism and martini-fueled antics were the only things keeping them sane. Rogers had actually been offered a shot at playing Hawkeye but found Trapper's more easygoing personality a better fit. He joined the show with the clear understanding that he and Alan Alda would be co-leads. For 3 seasons, their chemistry was undeniable. Rogers brought a grounded, roguish charm to Trapper that was the perfect counterweight to Alda's more neurotic energy. But just like McLean Stevenson, Wayne Rogers started to feel the show's gravity shifting. As Alan Alda's star rose, the script started to favor Hawkeye. More and more, Trapper's job was to be the loyal sidekick, reacting to Hawkeye's jokes instead of starting his own. This did not go over well with Rogers. He felt his character was being watered down and turned into a simple foil for the show's breakout star. He hadn't signed up to be second banana, and he watched his role get smaller and smaller. Off-screen, he and Alda were great friends. They even carpooled to set, but professionally, Rogers was fed up. So he decided that, like Stevenson, he was done after season 3. When he told the producers, they were furious. Losing 1 star was bad enough, but 2 at the same time felt like a disaster. They threatened to sue him for breach of contract, a typical Hollywood power play. But Wayne Rogers had an ace up his sleeve. As it turns out, he had never actually signed his contract. 3 years earlier, he had received the paperwork but objected to a morals clause, a then common provision that let studios fire actors for their offset behavior. Rogers thought the clause was insulting and refused to sign. In the chaos of launching a new show, this little piece of administrative oversight was completely missed. For 3 seasons, Wayne Rogers had worked on a hit show as a free agent. The legal threats vanished. With no contract, there was nothing to breach. Rogers was free to go. Because he made his decision after filming had wrapped, there was no chance for a big farewell. His exit was handled bluntly in the season 4 premiere. Hawkeye comes back to the tent to find Trapper gone, discharged without even a goodbye. Unlike McLean Stevenson, Wayne Rogers' career didn't suffer. He went on to star in the successful sitcom House Calls, and later found massive success as a real estate investor and a financial analyst on Fox News. His decision to leave Mass H, born from creative frustration and a principled stand, worked out great for him. It also forced the show to evolve, bringing in a new character, B.J. Honeycutt, who would forge a totally different, but just as deep friendship with Hawkeye, steering the show into a new era. Ferret Face. The Lipless Wonder. Major Frank. Burns was the guy everyone at the 4077th loved to hate. As played by the brilliant Larry Linville, Frank was a masterpiece of incompetence and hypocrisy. He was a terrible surgeon, a pompous fool, and a whining antagonist whose main job was to be the butt of Hawkeye and Trapper's pranks. His secret affair with Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan was a running gag, a relationship built on patriotic delusions. For 5 seasons, Larry Linville was the perfect cartoon villain, but as Mir Ashaj started to shift from a straight sitcom into something deeper, a problem came up. Frank Burns just wasn't built for depth. With the original creators gone and Alan Alda's influence growing, the show started exploring more serious themes. The other characters were changing. Hawkeye was getting darker. Margaret Houlihan was demanding more respect. But Frank was still Frank. Larry. Linville felt creatively trapped. He had signed a 5-year contract and played the same note perfectly for its entire run. But he was an actor, and he wanted more. He felt the character had nowhere to go. The show's new, more serious tone didn't have much room for Frank's brand of broad comedy. The pranks and name-calling started to feel out of place as the show dealt more honestly with the horrors of war. The final nail in the coffin was Margaret Houlihan's own evolution. In a key storyline, she gets engaged and married to Lieutenant Colonel Donald Penobscot. This completely severed her toxic tie to Frank, robbing him of his main relationship and reason for being on screen. With Margaret out of his orbit, Frank was pointless. Linville saw it too. He felt he had nothing left to give the character. So, when his 5-year contract ended after the 5th season, he chose not to renew it. Like Trapper's, his exit was handled off-screen. We learned that Frank had a final nervous breakdown and was sent to a psychiatric hospital back home. It was a fittingly pathetic end for the character, but it also marked the show's final transformation. Frank was replaced by Major Charles Emerson Winchester III, played by David Ogden Stiers. Winchester was everything Frank Burns wasn't. A brilliant surgeon, a sophisticated intellectual, and a true rival for Hawkeye. The conflict shifted from pranking a fool to a battle of wits. Leaving was a necessary choice for Larry Linville, but it came with the curse of typecasting. He worked steadily for years, but never fully escaped Frank's shadow. Still, his exit was a mutual parting of ways. The show had outgrown Frank Burns, and Larry Linville was more than ready to move on. Corporal Walter Radar O'Reilly was the soul of Maaswa H. As the only main actor to come over from the 1970 movie, Gary Berghoff was the show's original link to its source material. But the TV version of Radar was a softer, more naive kid from Iowa who slept with a teddy bear and had an almost psychic ability to know what his commanding officers needed. His innocence was the perfect antidote to the cynical, war-weary surgeons around him. For millions, Radar was the show's heart. Behind the character, though, Gary Berghoff was struggling. After 7 seasons, the grueling production schedule was taking a serious toll. He was suffering from what he later called severe burnout. Playing Radar meant he had to constantly project a wide-eyed optimism that was often the exact opposite of how he was feeling in his real life. That emotional disconnect was exhausting. The pressure wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. Berghoff was married with a young daughter, and the long hours meant he had almost no time or energy for his family. The strain contributed to the end of his marriage, which dissolved right around the time he left the show. He was giving everything to the show, but he admitted he had nothing left for the people he loved most. One director recalled filming Berghoff's final scenes and seeing him break down in tears during a take, speculating that the on-screen goodbyes were hitting too close to his real-life turmoil. There were also reports of on-set friction. Berghoff reportedly felt underappreciated and that he wasn't getting his proper dues. Some cast members said he became difficult to work with in his final years. Berghoff later admitted to being irritable, but explained it was because he cared so deeply about the show, not because of any ill will. He also felt his own identity was being swallowed by his characters. For 7 years, he wrote, "No new person in my life called me Gary. only radar. By the end of the 7th season, Berghoff knew he had to go. The producers, desperate to keep him, even offered a more flexible schedule, but he knew it would just be delaying the inevitable. He was at his breaking point. They decided to give Radar a special 2-part farewell in Season 8. Goodbye, Radar. In the story, Radar gets a hardship discharge to go home to his family's farm. The send-off is incredibly emotional, ending with Hawkeye finding Radar's teddy bear left on his bunk. A silent goodbye from the boy who had been forced to grow up in a war. Gary Berghoff's departure was about one thing: reclaiming his own life. It was a brave choice, but for him, it was the only choice he had. While most stories about Moashate's cast changes focus on the men who left, you can't talk about the show's evolution without talking about the woman who stayed and fought for her character, Loretta Swit. As Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan, Swit was the only female lead in a very male-dominated cast. And in the beginning, her character was a pretty awful, one-dimensional stereotype. She was the shrill, by-the-book army nurse whose nickname, Hot Lips, said everything about how she was seen, as a sexual object and the target of cruel pranks. But Loretta Swit refused to let Margaret stay a punchline. As the show grew, she used her voice to push the writers for change. She felt the affair with the married, incompetent Frank Burns was demeaning and had gone on long enough. She pitched the idea herself. Margaret should break it off with Frank, go to Tokyo, meet a high-ranking officer, and get married. When a producer worried that marriage was so permanent, Swit cleverly shot back, "Jean, you're divorced. How can you sit there and say that to me?" She didn't stop there. She then pitched that Margaret's new husband should cheat on her, forcing her to come back to the 4077th and find her own strength, realizing she didn't need a man to be complete. Her goal, she said, was for Margaret to become the best damn nurse in Korea. That collaboration between actor and writers turned Margaret Houlihan from a caricature into one of TV's most complex and celebrated female characters. Loretta Swit's fight for dignity wasn't a reason to leave. It was a powerful reason to stay, and her success was a huge part of what made MACH a timeless classic. So what's the real reason these actors left MACH? The truth is, there's no single answer. It's a messy combination of ambition, creative frustration, and the very real human cost of being on top. For McLean Stevenson, it was the seductive call of stardom and a bruised ego that confused the love for Henry Blake with love for himself, a mistake he deeply regretted. For Wayne Rogers, it was a principled fight against being reduced to a sidekick, a battle he won because of a forgotten detail in a contract. For Larry Linville, it was the creative dead end of playing a one-note character in a show that was becoming a symphony. And for Gary Berghoff, it was pure and simple burnout, the emotional toll of carrying the show's innocent heart on his shoulders for nearly a decade. What's truly amazing isn't that these actors left, but that MACH survived. The loss of a single star can kill a show, but MACH lost its commanding officer, its top surgeon, its main antagonist, and its company clerk, and it just kept going. Each departure forced the show to reinvent itself, bringing in new characters like Colonel Potter and Charles Winchester, who changed the dynamics and pushed the series into deeper, more dramatic territory. That constant state of change, just like in a real army unit, became the show's greatest strength. It proved MACH was more than its characters. It was an idea. It was a place where humor and horror lived side by side, and where humanity could be found in the most inhumane place on earth. The departures, as painful as they were at the time, were the very things that allowed the show to grow, evolve, and become the legend it is today. The stories of these actors are a powerful reminder of the real lives behind our favorite shows. Each exit left a hole, but also made room for something new. But what do you think? Which MACH character's departure hit you the hardest? Was it the shocking death of Henry Blake, the sudden disappearance of Trapper, the pathetic end of Frank Burns, or the emotional goodbye to Radar? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this look behind the curtain of a TV classic, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about your favorite shows. Thanks for watching.